Hi, I'm Desiree Fuller, and I'm going to be talking about my internship where I was an education intern at the Learning and Programming Department at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which is located in Winnipeg, Manitoba. They're not yet open, but they have an official opening date now of September 20th, 2014, so that's exciting. As a quick overview, I'm going to be discussing this paradigm shift from traditional museology to new museology, looking a bit about the background of CMHR, my internship project specifically, and then why I believe dialogue is a really important tool for the future of museums. And so I'm going to highlight two aspects of the paradigm shift in museology that really relate to CMHR. And so that is this idea that museums are moving from object-based focus models to audience-focused models. And the other one that I'm moving forward to is the voice of authority to dialogue. And so Nina Simon writes about this and this, how information is now a two-way street in dialogical institutions versus the one-way transfer of information. And so the interesting thing about CMHR is that it's being developed in this era of new museology. It's literally going to be a future museum. It's not even open yet. And so I was given the freedom to really try new ideas and lay that groundwork for future museum programming. So what I really wanted to do is make sure that my work was in line with their institutional culture. So I did this by reading almost anything I could get my hands on in the terms of strategic plans, gallery profiles, and missions mandate. And what I found in their mandate was that dialogue was one of their main institutional goals, something that they wanted to do for all of their visitors, is engage them in dialogue. And so I started my research in Canada's human rights journey, and I'm American, so this is a steep learning curve for me. But I found that the subject matter was sometimes heavy and often complex and intangible. So this will relate later to what my challenges were with my internship project. I also read Manitoba education curriculum documents focusing in the areas of social studies, English language arts, arts education, and physical education. And now that I kind of had my feet wet and I had the institutional culture, I knew what their goals were, I had the historical research and the education curriculum in me, I had to start putting together my activities. And so it was a challenge because I was making age-appropriate activities with this really heavy subject matter. But I found inspiration in an unusual place, and that was with Dr. Seuss. And so my mom used to read Dr. Seuss to me as a kid, and he actually has these pretty complex moral messages and these silly stories. And they're quite digestible, oh goodness, for children. So something that they can understand and take with them. And so once I was inspired. I ended up creating these resource kits that contain 7 different activities and customizable PowerPoints for local outreach with the education community in Winnipeg. And I'm going to highlight a few of these activities. The first being Spreading Light, which was a tag-based game that looked at the bystander effect. And so it was really meant to encourage dialogue around why vigilance is necessary for human rights in a way that was really familiar to children. Tag. And another program called Piece by Piece, I looked at the puzzle as a metaphor for the characteristics of human rights. And so each student would be assigned a puzzle piece to design after an article of the Declaration of Human Rights, again, kind of expressing what their knowledge of human rights was. Another program was called Wave Your Flag, which looked at the human rights movement and music together and really trying to connect that with what they were hearing on the radio today in the forms of Macklemore, MIA, protest artists that they were familiar with and could bring back to us. At the end of my internship, I held a lunch and learn seminar for the staff where I demoed one of my activities called Unless, Dr. Seuss and Human Rights. And so I talked about Dr. Seuss's life, and then I read the Lorax. And at the end of the Lorax, the one slur says, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to change, it's just not. And so I asked them, what would you change? I asked the staff, what would you change if you could? And then they designed their mustaches around this. And it was really interesting because they walked away really energized with this idea, talking about it. And in the last couple of days of my internship, I had the most guests out of my 12 weeks there coming back to me to tell me more about children's literature that they had read that could connect to human rights and improvements for suggestion. And so I think CMHR is on the right track in this institution. Not only is it about internal dialogue between departments, the moms in HR were really useful for me, but they didn't have a background in museum education. but also communicating with your audiences. My whole entire project was in response to a community need. And so, like human rights, I believe my experience was inalienable and that it's really going to inform my future career and how I approach programming in the future. Thanks.